This morning's reading is from the 18th chapter of Luke. There were some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everybody else. So Jesus told of them through this parable. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood up and prayed, "God, I thank you that I'm not like other men, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, not even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give a tenth of all I get." But the tax collector stood off far at a distance. He would not even look up, but beat his breast and said, "God, have mercy on me, a sinner." Verily I say this, that this man, rather than the other, the Pharisee, went home justified before God. For anyone who exalts himself will be humbled. He who humbles himself will be exalted. The word from the Lord in the house of the Lord. I love the prophet's statements. God said to his people, "I'm going to give you good stuff. I'm going to give you the fall harvest. I'm going to give you fall rains." Farmers in the Midwest pray for fall rains because that's when the soybeans fill out. The fall rains doesn't help the corn crop. It's already done. But if you have a field full of soybeans, then you hope for rains late in the fall because while the pods are filling and the beans get bigger, and then you want it to stop because if it keeps raining when the beans get ripe, they swell up and fall on the ground. Isn't it amazing in our lives there's often such a fine line between that which is almost perfect and that which is kind of like the two farmers lived side by side. Each of them had 160 acres of farm prairie land in northern Illinois, flat land, beautiful land. One guy had a brand new pickup, built himself a new house, had a great barn. The other guy had a pickup with a tailgate wired on and a tractor that broke down too often. And he finally went over to his prosperous neighbor and he said, "We have the same land. We plant basically the same crops. And you have a new house and you have a new pickup and you have your barn painted and my tailgate's wired on my pickup. How do you do it?" And the prosperous farmer said, "I'll tell you what my system is." He said, "When I'm facing a crisis, I go to my office and I take out my Bible, and I hold it head high, and I drop it on my desk. And whatever it comes open to, I close my eyes and put my finger on the page and drive until I feel a jolt. And I look and see what it says." One year it said, "Let your land lay fallow." And so I went into the soil bank 100%. Got $1 million from the government. Another time he said I did that, and I felt this jolt over on the other side, and I looked and it said something about lentils, so I planted my whole farm to soybeans. Soybeans went to $14 a bushel. I made $1 million. Guy said, "I'm going to try that." So he went home and he took his Bible, and he didn't actually have a desk. He had a table that had one leg shorter than the other, so it kind of wobbled a little every time he got near it. And he didn't really have a Bible. He had a Gideon's New Testament that he had stolen somewhere. And he dropped it, and he put his finger on it, and it came down, and he felt a jolt, and he looked, and it said, "Chapter 11. It's the little things, isn't it, that separate the wonders of great wealth from the wonders of what are we going to do next? Through Joel, God said to his people, "I'm going to bless you from now on." And that was after he had sent people to put them into bondage. He had carried them off to foreign lands as slaves, and he finally said, "Okay, it's time for my people to come together in their spirit." They were still far off. They were still separated. They were still isolated. And yet God said to them, I'm going to bless my people. And when I mention the word Israel, people suddenly say, okay, here's the little land over here that's surrounded by the Arabs who hate them. No. Israel is my people. Israel is, when God said Israel, he said, my people. So it's not a little nation, and it's not a particular religion, it's not a particular birthright. It is my people that he has promised to bless. He promises us a great harvest. And yeah, we face things that cause us great harm at times, and sometimes great discomfort. And yet we can bask in his love through all times. I love the reading from Timothy where he said, I stayed the fight, I ran the race, I completed the task. I almost think I'm doing a funeral when I stand up in front and talk about it. But that's what he asks of us. Don't give it a lick and a promise. Do the job. I think I told you a few weeks ago, if you're not going to do the job, you're just a butt print in the sand, right? Remember that one? Timothy said, Paul's letter to Timothy said, I am about to die. And when I was first arrested, when I was first imprisoned, when I was first charged, nobody came to my defense. And you know, when bad things hit us, we feel like we're the only one in the world who has a trouble. We're the only one that needs a knee. The only one that needs something else. We're the only one. And yet we look around and there's each and every one of us has a need that we can't fill by ourselves. Sometimes we have to resort to using really great professionals who have learned how to do these things and do them well. And sometimes we have to turn to God, who loves us well, always. Timothy said, Paul's letter to Timothy said, I have done the task I was assigned. I've run the race. I have completed it. He should have gotten a laurel wreath to put on his head, but he was in prison, and I don't think the Romans were going to do that for him. But he was content in his lot in the rest of his life because he had been faithful in his relationship with God. He had done the things that God asked him to do after Christ got his attention. You have to remember, this Paul who wrote all these wonderful letters, this Paul who preached the word around the world, this Paul who was the greatest spokesman for Jesus Christ the world has ever known, used to put Christians to death just because they were against his particular idea of what religion ought to be. But when God got his attention, when Christ entered his life, he became this new person. He received the bountiful fall harvest that the prophet Joel promised from God. So it isn't a matter of what you've done, it's what you can do. It's not a matter of what it has been, it's a matter of what is and what will be. Because we can't fix yesterday. We've talked about this before. Yesterday's gone. There's nothing there that we can change. We can wish it wasn't, but that doesn't make it different. The only thing we can do is take our life from this point on to where Christ would have us go with it. To seek the same harvest that Paul had. And you realize that the ultimate harvest that Paul had was to die in prison. And yet he was joyful for that because his reason for being there was Jesus Christ. So whatever our reason, whatever our thoughts, we need to make sure that we base them on Christ's love. Not the love of money and not the love of prestige. Sure, I pray every Sunday morning here. And for all you know, that's the only time I pray. Because the rest of it is my business. Mine and the Lord's. And I don't pray up here saying, Lord, keep on blessing me because it's been awful good this week. Because every once in a while it hasn't been awful good this week. But I'm more like, I hope, I trust I'm more like the tax collector. I'm not as good as I ought to be. I may be as good as I can be. But you know, he loves me anyway. And he promised me the fall harvest. He promises me my granary filled with grain, my threshing floor filled with grain to be thrashed, my vineyards producing. And I don't have any of those, but I can see that in my heart, in my soul, in my life, he has produced for me the bountiful harvest of love. I'm surrounded by it in this place. I'm besieged by it in this place. And I can only hope that the same feelings that I get in being here are the same ones that you get in being here, that this is the place I can feel that Christ is near to me. This is a place where I can count on being renewed, refreshed, rebuilt, revitalized in my relationship with Christ. I wish I had this moral fortitude to always be as positive as Paul. To know that I was in prison to die and was going to die there, and yet still write this letter saying, I'm the winner. I won. I'm here. I'm the victor. If I was an Indy driver, I'd get to pour milk over my head. If I was a baseball player, I would get to hit the home run. I'm none of those. I hope I'm one step up from a tax collector, but I'm probably not. But it makes no difference to my Lord. He has promised me through his prophets, through his love, through his history, through his story, he's promised me the fall harvest. A granary full of love, a vineyard full of spirit, a table set, not just for my friends, but for my enemies who he's asked me to love. And hopefully enough love to cover the table one time for all. No chapter 11 in our hearts. We're never bankrupt, for we have Christ. We have the harvest, the promise. Amen. The harvest is in. The granaries are full. His love abounds around us. We have but to open our hearts to be filled and filled over and over. For in his grace we live with joy. Go in peace. Amen.